Okay, everybody, thank you so much. We have one more session to go at our 2025 World Tourism Forum. Before we jump to our workshops, I am extra excited about this session. It was echoed in that previous panel. We're so thankful to have people that have shaped so much here on Cape Cod, individuals that we'll be talking about, if you look out the window here, water. So, with that said, apologies, my computer was freezing. With that said, it is my honor and pleasure to announce the next session. It is titled Water, Water, Water. In the development of this forum, Jill and I were so excited because we finally got the chance to come up with a really creative title for a session. So, Water, Water, Water stuck with us before we knew any of these people were even going to be speaking. We are going to be looking at water not just as a part of the blue economy, but diving a little bit deeper and talking about it from an infrastructure perspective, from a wastewater perspective, from a recreation perspective. Water is tourism's lifeline. We just talked about how water and the blue economy are the Cape's lifelines. And so with that said, I want you all to please help me welcome up each of the following individuals. Let's start with our moderator. She is the executive director currently of the John F. Kennedy Hyannis Museum, and I could go on and on about titles for this individual, but for now, let's just get a big round of applause going for Wendy Northcross. Thank you, Wendy. I'll let you step over here once I come up. Next up, he is the executive director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. And Andrew, I told everybody here to be bold. I told you on the phone to be bold. Excited to welcome you up, and thank you so much for joining us. Give it up for Andrew. Thank you. Next, we had her grace the stage earlier to talk a little bit about some of the research she's doing. Now she's putting on a separate hat. She's a PhD candidate in the Hospitality and Tourism Management program at Purdue University. She also will tell you about her other role that I should have put on here, but you tell them about it. It is everything related to this panel, and so I'm really excited to welcome up once again Filza Armadita. And last but not least, I am very thankful and excited to welcome up the chair of the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. Everybody make some noise, please, for Kevin Galligan. Thank you, Kevin. Yes. If the mics aren't on, there's like a little flick on them if you need it. Cool.
Hello. So I'm really honored that Katie and her panel and the panel before that, you kind of covered a lot of the issues of like why we're here, why water's important. But I guess I'm even more honored that when someone thought of wastewater, they thought of me. So, yes, I thought I got off. Well, I did get off. I stepped off the speeding bullet train in 2021, having got the Cape through COVID and having helped deliver some really exciting programs for Cape Cod in my 24-year career at the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, which was an add-on to my 8 years at the Hyannis Area Chamber, where I helped to create the JFK Hyannis Museum. Try having a president in your community and managing that. I was a co-creator of the museum that I'm now in retirement working as the executive director. So I stand here before you today with that. The people up here, well, Filza I just met virtually last week, but the people up here I've worked pretty closely with, and they've got great stories to tell, and we could probably be here all night, but we won't be. We are, I will just add to what's already been presented to you today that the Cape Cod Chamber was is the regional tourism council entity. It's also the regional economic development council. We are a DMO, and I always took the M to mean management and not just marketing. So Destination Management Organization worries about things like, oh my God, the water's bad, what do we do? Oh my gosh, the bridges are falling into the canal, what do we do? And we need more transit, we need EV infrastructure. So we were very active in trying to do some of that very aggressive, innovative problem solving. And one of the things I'm proudest of was the intersection of leveraging our tourism economy to help solve some of our wastewater issues, which our group is going to talk about right now. But what I'd like to do is first have people just give us your quick bio and what's your angle in life. So we'll start with Andrew. What's your angle, Andrew? What's the...
There we go. All right. Not technology. So currently executive director of the Association of Preserve Cape Cod. We're a almost 60-year-old environmental education and advocacy organization. And I guess our angle in life is to speak truthfully and bluntly about the good that we've done to our environment and the enormous harm we've done to our environment, and to motivate people to wake up to the reality of our impact on the resources that we have, and that we can do better and preserve this region, or we can let it go to hell.
It's an angle.
That's my angle.
Filza.
Sure. Hello, Filza Armadita. You know me as a PhD candidate at Dr. Jonathan Day's lab at Purdue University. And, you know, with my tourism background, seems kind of misaligned with what I'm about to tell you now, but I'm also a social scientist at Illinois Sustainable Technology Center under the Prairie Research Institute at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. That's a lot of words, but I do research mainly on workforce readiness in the energy sector and the energy transition. And so what we're looking at is doing analysis on how to upskill, reskill, retain, and then also looking at redesigning apprenticeship programs within the state of Illinois in terms of energy workers. Our particular office, so I'm not a water scientist, but you know, part of my work is trying to understand the technologies that we could do in turning wastewater into byproducts. Just to give you a little bit about what we build, our office builds the biggest carbon capture pilot in the world. I'll highlight on pilot. It's not the biggest carbon capture operation in the world, with Springfield, Illinois' City Water, Light, and Power. At their power plant. We also do a lot of research in emerging contaminants, so PFAS, PFOA, all that stuff. We also look into creating a sustainable aviation fuel additive called ethylbenzene from nanoplastics, all the way to utilizing algae as a carbon capture agent and for other byproducts such as SAF and fertilizer and all that. And so I kind of want to give an illustration of what we do, I think. Yeah, so this is an example of what algae blooms look like in a power plant, in a water treatment, wastewater treatment center. Algae can be harvested for byproducts. One of them is biofuels. Wastewater, in central Illinois particularly, it's conventional activated sludge, but we do have, for denser areas, we do have a sewage pipeline that goes into their different wastewater treatment centers. So it's a little bit different than what the Cape has and the issues that are involved in at the Cape. But that's kind of to give you an idea of the work that we do in the wastewater treatment centers that we deal with. I think there's a video of our scientists.
We get those algae blooms elsewhere.
Right. So this is algae wheel, which is a technology. It's not patented by us, but algae wheel, you can look it up. It's a technology that we use in kind of harvesting algae. If it is next to a power plant, it has the ability to capture carbon, and that high level of carbon content might not be used for byproducts, but at least could be an agent for decarbonization. Other ways that we can do that, if it is not near a carbon capture plant, not used as an agent for carbon capture, it could be used for other byproducts. So this is a raceway kind of structure. And it can go up to, or it can treat wastewater up to 1 million gallons a day. So I think that's a little bit about what we do. The angle that I'm in, Sorry, this is just really nerdy stuff. But yeah, hydraulic liquefactor is the thing that we do. I think my angle is that, I think there are real challenges with wastewater. There are, things and immediate things that we have to solve and urgency. However, looking at wastewater as a source for decarbonization in the effort to decarbonize an area is something that we could look forward to, and research is being done so then it can be implemented in different areas in the US. And so, not only looking at kind of conserving the environment, but also utilizing what is being wasted is something that I always try to encourage. That's it.
Cool, thank you. Kevin, you're wearing a couple of hats, not just the chair of the Water Protection Trust, but
I do.
Introduce
and
yourself.
Thank you, and good to be with all of you. And I think my angle is relatively simple. I get up every day trying to make the world a better place, as simple as that. How I'm confident in doing this is because of a little background in mechanical engineering, overseeing the construction of natural gas pipelines for about 20 years, serving as the energy efficiency program manager for the Cape Light Compact for about 10, and continuing to consult in energy, which I do love as far as energy efficiency. But fortunately, folks and voters in Orleans said, we'd like you to be a select board member, and I've loved that every day. So I think, in addition to my local commitment to the environment, through my involvement in the Orleans Conservation Trust, the land trust that protects over 650 acres, that connects both the land, the ponds, as well as walking trails for folks to enjoy. I've been fortunate for now 7 years to chair the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, which is just exciting to see the momentum that is underway. And we'll talk a little bit more.
You need a life, Kevin.
This is it.
Andrew, explain to our audience a little bit about Cape Cod's dynamic in terms of, the tourism season versus the year-round season versus what we were building versus what we weren't building.
Okay. And this thing doesn't work again. So, the Cape is a funny place in that you've got a relatively small, older, and less affluent year-round population than is characteristic of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We get much bigger and more crowded during the summertime, and both the year-round resident population and the visitor population are here for many of the same reasons. Because of the broad range of natural resources we have, people tend to look at out the window here, and that's the association that a lot of people have with the Cape, but the reality is we still continue to have fairly significant large open space holdings. About 40% of the Cape is protected open space. That's concentrated in two main areas: National Seashore, which is publicly accessible and a huge attribute and resource for the region and visitors. The other is 15,000 acres in the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, which just happens to be on Joint Base Cape Cod and is not publicly accessible unless you're carrying around a gun and want to shoot deer for the next couple of weeks. But otherwise, it's not a public resource. So people come here for the open space, people come here for the broader environment, and a lot of people come here for fresh water. There are 890 ponds of 10 acres or greater on Cape Cod. Significant portion of the use and enjoyment of the natural resources of the Cape is for people that are enjoying freshwater resources. And all of those water resources are all interconnected and are all responsive to the same things that we're doing to them. So everything on the Cape is from groundwater. We have no external source of water on the Cape. Everything that we have here for freshwaters and for our drinking water is precipitation. So we get about 42 inches of rain a year. We live on a sandbar. A significant portion of that water finds its way through the soils into the underlying aquifer on which we all sit. And the aquifer provides public and private drinking water sources. It provides the water that is in our ponds. It supports the freshwater streams that connect to the estuaries where the salt and freshwater worlds mix. So it's all connected. And, you know, it's a trite environmental saying that, you know, everything's connected to one another. It is really, in fact, actually true on Cape when it comes to water resources. And our use and enjoyment of the Cape's water resources have caused enormous damage to those water resources. And so a lot of the work that we're doing, where it intersects with some of the research you're gonna hear about, where it intersects with what Kevin is doing on the local level, is mitigating the impact of the choices we've made on how we manage our water resources on the Cape. So just, you know, in a tourist environment, you don't necessarily, and Wendy and I have had this conversation numerous times, you know, there's this fine line between telling people in reality what's happening, because until you confront...
There are no sharks. There is no bad water.
Right. You know, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one, right? So 90% of our saltwater estuaries on Cape Cod, every south-facing estuary on the Cape, everyone facing Buzzards Bay except one, 47 of 53 fail to meet state and federal water quality standards. About half of our ponds at some point in the last couple of years have failed to meet water quality standards or have had cyanobacteria blooms that create some toxicity problems that would limit, if you knew about them, would limit your desire to be in those bodies of water for certain times of the summer. And the reason for that is how we chose as a community to deal with our wastewater. So we were effectively running a 21st century operation on a 16th century waste disposal method. We dig a hole in the backyard and flush the toilet, goes in the hole, and most people don't think about it anymore. And that has resulted in clear and obvious harm to the water resources of the Cape. Not because people are dumping, you know, benzene and flammable liquids and toxics, although there is some of that, down the toilet, but because every time you flush the toilet, you're introducing phosphorus and nitrogen to the environment. That phosphorus and nitrogen finds its way through the groundwater to each of these water resources and puts nature out of balance and degrades water quality and reduces habitat.
And why did we do that?
We do that because this is the cheapest first cost. The Cape made a choice when other communities in the 1970s and 80s were getting 90 cents on the dollar in federal money to build municipal wastewater infrastructure to deal with, you know, human sewage, which I would imagine where most of you come from, you live in a community that has a sewer system, because most of Massachusetts has a sewer system. Most of Cape Cod does not. And so it was thought that, A, the environment had an extinguishable amount of ability to assimilate human waste without any impact. That wasn't true. We recognized that decades ago, and it took decades to get to the point where we were ready to deal with it. So the basic problem is, because we distributed this problem to each one of us who owns a home, each one of us who has a business, there was no singular bad guy to go to and enforce against who had a pipe that was discharging a problem. And I talked to some people the other day, and they said, well, you know, we're from, one of the Great Lakes communities. Said, you know, we had a big problem in the 70s. You know, the lake was on fire, and we fixed it. Well, yeah, of course you did. Mm-hmm. And because it was all industrial scale pollution, you had a handful of major polluters that you could put your thumb on from a regulatory basis. It's real different when you're going after the bad guy, whoever the bad guy is, versus all of us. Because none of us gets up in the morning and thinks, what am I going to do to screw up the environment today? But the first thing most of us do in the morning screws up the environment. So, you know, part of it was just getting the self-awareness and this willingness to take on your own practices. The second and hardest part, and Kevin's really well qualified to talk
Yeah,
about,
I was gonna call on Kevin. No,
is
tee him up.
is to solve the problem requires a municipal scale intervention. I, as the individual homeowner, with general minor exceptions that I won't get into, can't do much to solve the problem that I create with where my toilet flushes to. The towns can. And it took the towns a while to get equipped and financed and get their minds around the obligation to do it.
So Kevin, because the chamber was part of this initiative, and I remember when Governor Romney was around, we asked for money for education campaigns because it was, we can't solve this problem until everyone believes we have a problem. But you were
Exactly.
living the dream in Orleans.
It took a long time.
How many town meeting votes no did you?
We had about 7 no votes, and eventually we realized, believe it or not, we had such a gap between the people who were saying no versus the, I'll say, incredibly hard-working volunteers that did know, like the previous panel said, the science. They understood the problem. They actually saw credible, cost-effective solutions, but we could not get the antis on board. And literally, we had to hire, despite the fact that we got the adults in the room, we actually had to hire a mediator from Consensus Building Institute out of Cambridge and put everybody in a room. And I can remember the very first meeting was the mediator said, you know, I just want you to go around the room, fill out each your little, Post-it note. What's your vision of Orleans? And just fill it out. And after that exercise, we all realized in the room, we all wanted the same thing. We really did believe in a healthy environment. We did really believe in a vibrant economy. And as it was said before, and it's been said over and over, and will be repeated, Dan Wolf, the economy is our environment. Our environment is our economy. It did take many sessions of asking a question, listening to the question, and answering the question over and over. We went for 18 months to develop the first, what we call the consensus plan, that actually got agreement on the sewer technology, the sewer service areas for our first 2 phases of sewer. That phase 1 is done. Phase 2 is close to being complete now, and we're going into phase 3. But you got to listen, you got to bring people to the table, and as Andrew kind of sprinkled in, you do have to bring funding to the table so everyone feels they're playing their part. And that's where a lot of you folks come in, is to realize that for the first time, I think it was Governor Baker, we all referred to him as Charlie, in 2018, I believe it was December 28th, signed the law to create the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund that said, yeah, the feds chip in some money, the state chips in big time, all the towns, taxpayers are going to chip in, but for the first time, the people we actually have to design these systems to in terms of the peak day in the summer, which is the visitors, are going to chip in through the Cape and Islands Water Protection.
Could you just emphasize that, though?
Sure.
Because one of the big barriers was cost, right? And first of all, you don't see it. You're flushing your toilet. It's like, it's gone. It's not my problem. But the others are you go to town meeting and you're being asked to vote for something that's like a really expensive thing. But why was it so expensive?
Well, our first phase had 2 components. All the pipes that collect the product, it's referred to in the industry, that brings it to a treatment plant. So the treatment plant as a standalone project was in excess of $40 million. Now,
And how many people live in Orleans?
we have a year-round population of about 6,300 people.
Right.
And that, as many of you know, triples in the summer. So
you
on
have
that
to
July 4th week,
Build it for a
that's
triple.
when the product flowing into the plant needs to be designed to receive it safely and discharge it properly. So absent all the visitors, that plant size, that capital cost would all be much lower. But at the same time, we love all of you coming to Cape. So we will design the plant appropriately, the pipe sized right, and plan for the future as well. And everybody's chipping in. And it actually has created significant momentum that I see in my role across all the Cape communities, because as you visit any town from Mashpee all the way to P-Town, it'd be easier, Wendy, for me to say how many towns are not advancing a sewer project right now. I mean, you see it with the detours and the cones, but here's a quick one. Aside from what we know is the environmental benefit of this, I will ask you all, what do you think the one benefit people have actually said to us after the sewer projects have done? I've got better roads. We repave the roads. Curb to curb, they're smoother, they're better. So again, whenever you're proposing things, whether it be what you market, you always want to add some extras. So better roads is a real good extra.
So just to tie up the rest of this story, I mean, the Cape Cod Chamber got involved really when we had the federal lawsuit that said everyone's going to have to clean up their wastewater. That whether you have a septic system or not, we don't care. You're on the hook. And our concern at the Cape Cod Chamber was, oh my God, we're nothing but small businesses here. This is going to put businesses out of business. People will leave the Cape because they were, at that point in time, upside down in their mortgages. Just give the keys back to the bank and leave the Cape. So all of these economic impacts were scaring us.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, building the difference between the base load capacity and the peak for the 6 weeks in the summer almost doubles the cost of the infrastructure. And so some of the argument was, do those 215,000 older, less well-off, year-round residents bear the entirety of that cost to support the visitor economy, given that the visitor economy is intricate to why all of our property values are what they are. So we had to grapple with and come to a conclusion, some resolution of that. The other one is, as an environmental advocate, early on, our best, most reliable, consistent, productive partner was not my friends in the environmental community. It was Wendy in the chamber, which was an unusual framework. We had people working to address this fundamental environmental / economic interest, and the Chamber of Commerce is out front on an environmental issue, and it speaks to some of the importance of local leadership that we've had at the Chamber over the years. But it also reflects an early recognition from the business community that this was not just something that could be done on residential property tax, because in Massachusetts, most of this type of work gets funded through residential property tax. And property tax in general, but property tax on the Cape is dominated by the residential contribution. Right. So we had to come up with this way of doing it, and the mechanism that of the body that Kevin now chairs, tapped into the tourist economy by having, 2.75% surcharge on each night's stay. So $2.75 of every $100 goes to a fund that then is dedicated legislatively to support 25% of the municipal cost of debt to build this infrastructure. All of a sudden, Kevin could go to his voters. When I was in Mashpee, I could go to mine and say, we're building a treatment plant and our first round of sewering, and it adds 0 cents to your tax rate. So for no incremental tax rate increase, do you want cleaner water or not? And guess what people said? Sure. And we haven't seen any dip, I don't think, in the tourist economy. There is a break point. We're below it as it relates to this particular fee. And so it's been adopted, and it's now part of the fabric.
So for the DMOs in the room, or anyone else that's active in your community, the intersection with the chamber was we had this economic issue with water and infrastructure, and we also had a tourism committee that wanted to level the playing field between the short-term rentals that were taking away the business from the traditional B&Bs and hotels, because they were taxed out the wazoo, highest tax we have in the Commonwealth, and the short-term rentals were tax-free, they weren't inspected, and we met with Airbnb in my office, and they admitted to me finally at the end of a 2-hour meeting we were at the top 5 of their markets. And I said, okay, kids. So what ended up happening over a lot of pots of coffee and a lot of strange bedfellow meetings was that, and we didn't meet in bed, we met in my conference room. We met the intersection of if we level the playing field on what gets taxed by adding a few words to our existing tax code, and then dedicate an add-on to that, like the cities have to fund a convention center, but we put it into a fund that only the municipalities can access, then we can build the infrastructure that we need, and we'll hope we're going to raise enough money. It passed. We had great leadership in the State House for that. But so, Kevin, how much have we raised since the inception? We were hoping for a couple of $1 million. I mean,
So through this year, we have subsidized, this is commitments through that fund, over $300 million. And that is a 25% subsidy. So again, picture telling your voters at town meeting, there is outside funding supporting 25%. Is this a real deal? Yes, there is a commitment letter voted by this body. We have the funds flow to predict and confirm it that has supported the investment of $1.2 billion of infrastructure across the Cape. And our forecast out to 2030 is another $250 million of subsidy to support another $1.2 billion. So this is awesome. It is working. We've got good eyes on it, highly transparent, all that good stuff, but at the same time, the contractors are more than busy, let me tell you.
well, just like the sharks created a great amount of business for swimming pool developers, we're hoping that, this has been a huge leverage for our Blue Economy Initiative. And as we learn more every day about our water, I would like to hear from Filza some of the things that you're working on, because we are now facing, like, how do we deal with those forever chemicals? And our aquifer is under the whole Cape. We all bring our drinking water up, and it's all connected, and we've just gone through a 2-year drought cycle, I think. So the water issue is presenting all of these interesting challenges. But what have you seen in the space that you're working on? And like, is there a fantastic job creation around some of these algae, carbon capture processes, or is there something we could be looking at as a region? Flick it up.
All right. So I think that in looking into emerging contaminants, particularly for forever chemicals, scientists are working hard every day to kind of identify how to filter it, first and foremost. We're not at the stage where we are looking at byproducts with those, but I think that it should be in every conversation, regarding just products that we are consuming, water quality levels and levels of forever chemicals in your water systems. Also something to look into, right? So on a municipal level, constant testing on these forever chemicals is really important in identifying. It's everywhere, right? But having comparisons and doing testing is important. But the only way to kind of combat that right now is only through filtration. Just to kind of give you a small example, we do testing on Brita filters and how they actually filter PFAS, and it has shown some kind of positive outcomes as to the filtration level. It might not filter everything, but it shows positive light in your drinking water if you do filter it through a Brita filter. So that's one example to it. Identifying, we're coming up with technologies where you can kind of look into how much PFAS is within a surface. And so, working hard every day for that technology to come out and is economical enough for municipals to use. But I think that, as we are creating these technologies and building these technologies, workforce readiness is important. And so I think that, training or allowing for young people to know that there are these problems and there are these jobs that could help in solving these issues is a great gateway for them to be able to support, choosing careers in these industries. As far as water goes, it's quite it's only a handful of jobs, usually in a water treatment center, wastewater treatment center. For example, part of the work that we do is nitrogen farming for fertilizers. So taking ammonia and turning into fertilizers. That the job analysis isn't too high, although it is needed, and so. What we do try to do is prioritize lower income areas and making sure that there is apprenticeship programs available for individuals who are seeking employment in those areas. And so I think redesigning apprenticeship programs and its requirements and prioritizing certain zip codes or certain municipalities is a way to be inclusive in building that workforce. Places like our large pilot or a carbon capture operation would require a higher kind of blue collar employees, and so in that case, that's kind of a bigger operation. So naturally, it's a bigger number. More jobs can be produced in that way. But I think when we're talking about wastewater, even with a handful of jobs could really be helpful for low-income areas to get priority into those jobs and for us to be inclusive for those areas. Yeah.
And we're always on the hunt for alternatives. I know we're going to take a couple extra minutes because we got a couple of minute late start. But the alternatives to wastewater, we heard a lot about that. It's like, oh, just do... I don't know, come up with an alternative to big pipe. Urine diversion, just do this, just do that. And that's kind of been a hard sell, but I think now that we know we're building big pipe and we're building the right investment, we can have a little bit more conversation about alternatives, right? Kevin, can you just
Happy
quickly...
to talk. And if anybody looks at the plans that we file and get approved by the state, they're actually called adaptive management plans. And that word adaptive means, as we learn about new technologies, particularly if they're more cost effective and frankly get the job done quicker, we're all for that. And actually in our case, and we've seen it across other communities, we've had very good results with aquaculture deployment. You heard from a fishing panel just before. We actually are taking credit through oyster production in a little pond in Orleans that gives us some nitrogen credits because, in fact, the oysters, when they're deployed by seed, as they grow, those shells and the growth of that meat is taking up nitrogen. We then eat them, and we enjoy them, but that gives us a 100 kilogram reduction of nitrogen. And in fact, in our mill pond study that we're looking at right now, we feel that water body that is significantly compromised and is part of the Nauset estuary system may actually be another example of deploying more oysters. So
Yum.
let's learn more
we
as
have
we go.
oysters today?
Exactly. We're all getting hungry.
Well, let's do a couple of Q&A for those burning questions that maybe you don't have. Y'all want a cookie? Did y'all have a cookie? Okay.
Hi, I'm from Lake Tahoe, and in 1970 we had a state law that mandated the central sewers, but it was early days of development, so over time it's probably one of the best things done for water quality. For the
Yes.
But I grew up in Delaware, and in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, there's still a lot of septic. So
Yeah.
the question is, if you're in a community that doesn't have access to the central sewers yet on the Cape, is there any requirement at the point of a home sale to at least fix the septic system? Because there's a lot of generational homes that are turning over in resort towns. That is a time when there is more cash available than on a day-to-day situation.
So the requirement exists, but it's in the context of a regulatory system that
Doesn't really
made
work well.
legal and required polluting technology, right? So there's no
Title V.
Title V septic, there's no septic system that does as good a job at reducing nitrogen as a municipal collection system. So yes, at time of transfer, you have to make sure that your septic system is code compliant and upgrade it and replace it if it isn't. The new system you put in to become compliant will continue to cause further degradation of the water resource. So it's a lousy system for Cape Cod. It's a statewide regulatory system that works just fine where septic systems are the exception, not the rule. When this whole process started, 97% of the properties on Cape Cod were serviced by on-site septic systems. It just does, as a approach to dealing with a problem of this scale, they don't function. So out of the box, they're a problem. A failing system's worse than a new system, but none of them are good enough by themselves to replace municipal infrastructure.
I can add quickly to that, and it's a really good question. In my role on Select Board, I've been liaison to our Board of Health, which is the body that oversees the state regs that Andrew mentioned. What I am seeing happen in terms of properties for sale by new owners is the one question is, gee, could I get another bedroom? That then triggers either a no, and how could I get another bedroom is by installing an on-site advanced treatment system. They're called IAs, Innovative Alternative Systems. A lot of people are doing them. They're very costly. They come during the time of transfer. They come with monitoring requirements. They come with a lot of responsibility that I say, why would people do it? But they do. But it does enhance the value, and it is one workaround.
But it does, even though it's better than a conventional, it still degrades. So where we every one of those IAs that we allow to go in to support additional bedrooms on an existing home adds to the number of homes. Kevin has to hook up to a sewer to offset them. So they're fine in hard to sewer areas that don't contribute a lot, but most of them gotta go.
So essentially,
I'm here.
with bad water, nobody would want a vacation here, own a home here. Why would you want to be here? And we're well on our way to fixing that. But we believe this is going to be a 30-year process to build out what we need to do, because a long time ago we decided if we don't build sewers, we won't overpopulate the Cape, and it will stay nice and rural. And get better. That didn't happen. But anyway, any last thoughts? Any last questions? Any more cookies left? Okay. There's cookies left, and you need to go into breakout sessions? Is that the... So, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Filza and Kevin and Andrew, and thank you all.